So, during quarantine, Netflix released an original anime about an anthropomorphic world facing a racial divide, in which a wolf tries to bridge the gap between the two. And it was great. So great, in fact, they were like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just do it again. While on the surface, it can be easy to look at Beastars and Brand New Animal and just lump them together as anime Zootopias, there's a lot more going on under the fur of these shows. What's more is, aside from the vague premise I gave you at the start, each show diverges off into their own unique stories. A couple quick warnings before we continue. This is going to be a deep dive into both series, so I'm not going to hold back on spoilers for either. Second, while BNA is an anime original, Beastars is based off a manga that is still currently running, but I haven't quite caught up to it, and it wouldn't be fair to Brand New Animal, so we're just looking at Season 1, Beastars anime. And last, I just want to address this now. Whenever I use the term racism or anything to that effect, it's within the context of their respective worlds. Especially all that's been happening in the world, there's no point in making the parallels to real-world racism. I'll link you to the Wisecrack video on Zootopia, but put simply, within both Beastars and Brand New Animal, there's a very real physical divide between both sides, and that just doesn't exist in the real world. So to answer the question of, how are they as real-world allegories? They're shit. In Beastars, the racial tension is between the carnivores and the herbivores. It's a double-edged sword that's been ingrained into this society. Physically, predators are just that, predators, and are not only much bigger and stronger than the prey, but are different down to their traits and diets. The other edge of the blade is that there's a strong stigmatism around the predators, especially in its main setting of Cherryton Academy, where a student was recently found dead at what is believed to be the hands of a predator. It's not that any action has been directly taken against them, but it's the avoiding of eye contact, not wanting to associate with, type of discrimination. BNA features a much clearer dichotomy between its two sides. In a predominantly human world, there exists a race known as beastmen, who can shift between the form of a human and a more anthropomorphic side. It's a much starker contrast, and the narrative reflects that, as beastmen are strongly discriminated against, and they had to relocate to a whole new island just to start their own city. Beastars has a definite racial tension, but as a whole their society still functions, whereas Brand New Animal is a much more real and act upon racism. Where both shows draw from the same conceptual idea of telling a story using animal people, the stories they tell are fundamentally different. The best way I can describe it to you is they each have a different narrative focal point. To give you an example, take, I don't know, Astro Lost in Space, which uses the lens of space survival with a focal point on its characters. Brand New Animal and Beastars both use a lens of animal-people society, but where Beastars has a more focus on the people, Brand New Animal looks more at its society. Tonally, each show is different too. Brand New Animal is much more lighthearted and fun, and I don't want to come across like I didn't like it. I had a ton of fun with it, but like, it's so much lighter on the narrative. Like, you watch it for the same reasons you watch porn, okay? It's not because the plot is anything fantastic, but it's just so nice to look at. Like, seriously, go watch BNA. It's slick as hell, but we're here to talk about its story and, well, for starters, at the core of its story is the conflict between humans and beastmen. And while, like, yeah, it's there, it exists, it's so surface level. Like, for fuck's sake, Alan Silvesta, our big bad, feels evil just for the sake of being evil because humans are bad, and they had this audacity to be like, aha, you fools, I was secretly a beastman all along, like,
oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Alongside our protagonist Michiru, the brand new animal, if you will, most of our attention is on Anima City, who, having just celebrated its 1-year anniversary, is still going through a lot of the growing pains. You know, the black market, the mafia, cults, the usual. That's not to say that Beastar society doesn't face its own problems, but our eyes are on the characters and how they navigate that inherently flawed world they live in. Things like, you know, the black market, the mafia. Oh, not cults. BNA at least has that on them. And on top of these, these aren't new issues in Beastars. The problems that plague the world are deeply rooted and hide in plain sight. The core cast all have at some point in their life come to their own realization that their place in society and how it's so broken, each of them exemplifying a different outlook on life. Legoshi, despite being one of the literal top dogs, is acutely aware of that double-edged sword I mentioned, and would rather live timid, suppressing his more predatory instincts. Directly foiling Lewis, who spends every day striving to become the next titular Beastar. No longer wanting to live in the shadows of carnivores, despite being a red deer, I got such a strong vibe that he was doing what he could to emulate the carnivores. And all that foils Bill, a true carnivore through and through. There are full sends only with this Chad Tiger. The list goes on and on, but it's such an interesting dynamic to see how many different, often clashing ideals exist within the same social circle. When one of these strong personalities reaches discord between another person or against society itself, is where our conflict is born. And that's something almost entirely absent from Brand New Animal. More or less, the characters aren't products of society, but rather one of the many moving pieces of it. Mayor Rose, Marie the Weasel, Jem and Melissa all have an identity in Anima City, but not because of Anima City. The difference is subtle, but it's there. There are two exceptions to that, however. First up is Grand Grandma, having to traffic kids in order to repay debts to the mob, and of course, Jackie, who, along with the rest of the bears, live in the slums because, well, A, they're shit at baseball, but B, their coach was also paying off debts to the mob under the table. The only issue is Grand Grandma is only in the one episode, and Jackie's just a halfwit. Like, I love Jackie, they're funny and lovable, but they're just also a smooth brain. Like, Jackie, come on, like, I love you and I want what's best for you, but there's no way that water purifier isn't a pyramid scheme. You're doing yourself no favors here. Wait, Will Smith, not you too. Wait, come on, you're better than this. Think about Will. Am I saying that Beastars characters are better? Yes, but that goes back to its narrative focal point on its characters, so like, it was a losing battle to begin with. For the story that BNA is trying to tell about society, its characters do fill that role pretty well, if not without their flaws. Shiro Ogami, who, in the biggest plot twist of the year, second only to Alan mudding my own plot point Sylvasta, is actually Silverwolf, the guardian protector of the Beastmen. Having lived through the massacre of his people and countless years of human oppression, he draws a very hard and fast line that all humans are bad for Beastkin. But through his time with Michiru, learns that things aren't so black and white. I think the most interesting character to me would be Nazuna, having to take on the alter ego of Deseluve, becomes the figurehead of the Silverwolf cult, posing as none other than Silverwolf. While very blatantly she's being used by her assistant Boris, none of that matters to Nazuna, at least not at first. In her own words, all she ever wanted to be was a pop idol, and leading a cult is basically the same thing. Nazuna's sole goal is to find a place in the world, somewhere that loves and values her, even if that means leading a cult to do so. But even after being such a dick to Michiru, who was her best friend when they were humans, her persistence convinced Nazuna that someone holding her so near and dear is worth so much more than an entire cult's worth of worship. I've been skirting around talking about Michiru herself because I don't necessarily see her as part of the society, but rather its main agent of change. To close things out, I want to look at the endings and the messages they leave with us. Because for Michiru, having spent so much time hiding and on the run when first turning into a Beastman, Michiru fled to Anima City, it being advertised as a safe haven for all Beastmen alike. But all too soon found out that the grass is just greener on the other side. For as light as the tone of BNA is, they don't pull punches on the subject matter. From the trafficking of kids to a disregard for beastkin life, Michiru isn't content to just sit around and do nothing. Despite both her flaws and those of the city, her level of empathy and proactivity are enough to start even the tiniest bit of change. Again, in both the city and herself. She says it best in the last episode, simply titled Anima City. In the aftermath of near destruction, she stands with Shiro, having found a new resolve, saying something to the effect that in this city because of who she is and her place in society. There's something out there that only she can do, even if she doesn't know what it is yet. And that's enough to have hope for society. Beastars isn't over. The manga is still serializing, and there's a season 2 slotted for 2021, but as it stands, season 1 left us with Legoshi. Having spent so much of his life hiding and suppressing his carnivorous instincts, lives in a world where beneath the surface exists a strong tension between carnivores and herbivores, and all too soon found out he just can't suppress his instincts forever. From the trafficking of kids to a disregard for beastkin life, Legoshi is forced to have to navigate both his own flaws and those of the city. His level of empathy and giving in to his inner predator are enough to start even the tiniest bit of change in Legoshi. He says it best in the last episode, in the storm's wake. In the aftermath of having to fight off the mafia to save the rabbit he loves, he stands with Haru, having found a new resolve, saying something to the effect that because he loves her, in spite of who he is and the society they live in, that he will get stronger, just to make her happy. And that's enough to have hope for the two. Thank you for watching. I had a ton of fun with this. The whole comparing and contrasting element was new this time, so let me know if you liked it. If you didn't like it, I hope you liked it. I worked really hard on it. And leave a suggestion if you're like, oh, what about X and Y? Compare those, or A and B. I'd love any and all feedback and suggestions. My list is for sure running low. I think I have 2 or 3 more ideas stored in the back pocket, and then we're just gonna, I don't know, see what happens from there. So, would love your help filling that out. If you want my opinion on like Beastars or Brand New Animal is more of a like fodder show. Not like fodder, like it doesn't matter, but like you can have it on in the background and could be doing something else and you won't really miss out much. Whereas Beastars is more like engrossing, sit down and like involve yourself in this world. If you're like, but you can only pick one, I think it's pretty obvious. You should watch